Okay, so it is 1 o'clock p.m. East Coast time, and we always do our best to get started on time, so everyone's on mute right now. But when the time comes for questions or comments, I'll tell you how to request unmuting so we can unmute you. It's basically just pressing a button on your keypad so I know that you have a question or a comment, and that'll raise your hand. So welcome to another American Promise Citizen Uprising Core Team call. This is a call that happens on the second Saturday of every month. And thanks to all of you that have taken time out of your busy weekend to join us today, and to folks that are going to be listening to the call afterwards, welcome to you as well. So we are honored to have a few guest speakers here with us today, including Congressman Jim McGovern of Massachusetts. And after we hear from the Congressman, we're going to do some Q&A, and then we're going to continue our training on meeting with members of Congress and moving elected officials up the champion scale. And so we've been really inspired by folks that have been stepping up all across the country to start new American Promise Associations, or as we call them, APAs, American Promise Associations. And we recently received an email from a gentleman in Buffalo, Wyoming, that really highlights the importance of these trainings and becoming better spokespersons for the 28th Amendment. And I just briefly want to read his remarks. He said, after your recent conference call where I heard a conversation, role play, and some coaching on how to form a partnership with your member of Congress on bringing Republicans onto our bills, I attended an unrelated event where I happened to bump into my state representative, who I'd run against last November. We had a pleasant conversation, he says. I was able to employ some of the questions suggested during that call and really pique his interest in this 28th Amendment project. I'm perhaps understating my excitement about this. So thank you for making the call, coaching, and advice available. I will attend as secretary a county Democratic Party meeting on June 6th, and I would like to invite the group to participate in the next conference call with me. And so, you know, this is exactly why we do these calls, to give folks the necessary tools and training to be in action in their community, so they can feel confident and competent about having these conversations about the 28th Amendment. And this is the type of action that's really going to cause a big breakthrough in the 28th Amendment movement, and it's really happening all across the country. It's very exciting. So again, thanks to everyone on the call who's already started American Promise Association or in the process of starting a new APA. And I believe Joyce Sanchez, Citizen Engagement Coordinator, was going to jump on the call, but I don't see her on yet. And I was going to have her list some of the APAs that are just getting launched. Excuse me. So I just want to mention a few of the APAs that are getting up and running. Last week we launched or relaunched new APAs in Kansas City, Missouri, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and coming this month and next, we'll launch 3 new groups in New Jersey, one in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Naperville, Illinois, Augusta, Georgia, Juneau, Alaska, and a few others. And if you're interested in starting a new American Promise Association in your town, you can send Joyce an email at joyces@americanpromise.net. Once again, that's joyces@americanpromise.net. If you're interested in starting up a new APA, and we hope that you are, go ahead and shoot Joyce an email, and then we'll follow up with a phone call. So I want to introduce the Congressman here in just a few minutes. I think we're waiting for him to jump on. So the Congressman McGovern should be on any minute, I believe. And Congressman McGovern, for those that don't know, is a representative from Massachusetts and has been really a true leader in this movement since the beginning, and is a lead sponsor of the People's Rights Amendment and a co-sponsor of the We the People Amendment. And while we wait for the Congressman to jump on, I'm hoping that because last month we focused on the Democracy for All Amendment with Congressman Raskin, that told us a little bit about that amendment resolution. And this month our action is focusing on the We the People Amendment. And I'm hoping to kick it over to Johannes Epke real quick, who is counsel at American Promise, that can just talk a little bit about the differences between the two bills, so we can just get a better understanding of what's out there and what's been introduced in Congress. So Johannes, are you with us?
I sure am. Howdy, Ben.
Welcome.
Yeah, so a couple amendment proposals have been introduced. The Democracy for All, which we're mostly familiar with, and the We the People is another version. There are several other versions introduced in Congress and not introduced, but those two are sort of the two leaders at this point in terms of support in Congress. On first blush, they might seem pretty similar to folks. You read through them and they seem to address money in politics and corporate rights. But obviously when it comes to constitutional amendments, every little phrase, nuance, word, punctuation has major consequences. And so looking at the real nuances of the language between these two bills is very important. And so a few differences that I'll highlight. First, I think the one that most folks are probably familiar with is that the Democracy for All amendment addresses money and politics and corporate rights when it comes to free speech or the First Amendment. The We the People amendment is different in that it addresses all corporate constitutional rights, or seeks to reverse the doctrine that corporations and other artificial entities, creations of state law, have any rights, inherent inalienable rights under the Constitution. That has consequences far outside of the realm or reach of campaign finance reform more narrowly. So a couple examples of that. The We the People amendment would address corporations claiming equal protection rights under the 14th Amendment, or due process or takings rights under the 5th Amendment. And so a lot of different impacts there that the We the People amendment would have that the Democracy for All would not. And so in that sense, it's a broader attempt at limiting corporate power over the government and over elections. Some unanswered questions that come up in that realm are, what are some of the potential unintended consequences of stripping all corporations and artificial entities of constitutional rights? Some people point to nonprofit organizations and privacy rights with respect to their membership list as one example of a right that we as a society may want to let corporations have, especially nonprofits or other non-for-profit entities. So that's one difference between the two amendments. And in some senses, that's a strategic difference in that a lot of the supporters of the Democracy for All amendment support the notion of overturning all corporate constitutional rights, but suggest that it is better done in a two-amendment strategy. So the People's Rights Amendment is, in some people's minds, a good partner amendment to the Democracy for All amendment, get something passed on money and politics, and then later go back and get something done on the corporate rights piece. But that's not the only difference between the two amendments. There are several other clauses and phrases in there that have a serious consequential difference. So one is the Democracy for All amendment has a third section which says nothing in this article shall be construed to grant Congress or the states the power to abridge the freedom of press. That's a clause that is not included in the We the People amendment, and there's some disagreement about whether or not that would be a necessary clause, a helpful clause, or potentially even a loophole that could cause the intended consequence or effect of the Democracy for All amendment to essentially just have a loophole in it. So some discussion about that is ongoing, the consequences of that phrase, the inclusion of it or not. Another big difference is that the We the People amendment has a mandatory enabling clause in it, saying that the federal, state, and local government shall regulate, limit, or prohibit contributions. The Democracy for All amendment uses, instead of shall, a may. So instead of requiring or creating a duty, it creates an authority. And there's some strategy difference there. Some folks think that by saying shall in the We the People amendment, it is potentially going to scare states off of ratifying it, and then it creates a potential action against them if they don't regulate money in politics like the amendment directs them or requires them to do. Obviously, it's more powerful if we can pass it in that we get an action against states that don't, but whether we can get that across the 38 state ratification line with that requirement in there as opposed to the may is an unanswered question. I think it's a good strategy question. So there's some unanswered questions in terms of strategy, but there's a lot of unanswered questions in terms of constitutional law there. And so American Promise has undertaken, we just launched an 18-month-long project called Writing the 28th Amendment. Not saying that either of these two amendments aren't what will ultimately be passed, but just examining all of those issues in great detail so that we can get the best information possible and make the best decision about what to go forward with. Because obviously, ultimately, only one of these will end up enshrined in the Constitution. So we want to make sure we do it right.
Great, thank you, Johannes. And Congressman McGovern was on, and I just saw him jump off. So hopefully he will dial back in. And while we're waiting for the Congressman, I'd like to open it up to questions for Johannes on his kind of description and analysis of these two amendments. So if you have a question on either the Writing the 28th Amendment project or any questions for Johannes on what these two bills are intended to do or what's different about them, go ahead and press 1 on your keypad now. Go ahead and press 1 on your keypad, and we'll call on you. It looks like we have some hands up, so we're just going to take a couple quick questions. Let's go to Ann Talipiero. Ann, how are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good, thanks. What's your question?
Well, I wanted to hear more about this Writing the 28th Amendment project. I've been talking to Joyce about trying to organize here in Oregon, and I've been running into, I haven't been able to really get much interest because people think it's just another group, and they don't understand why we need another group. So I think maybe that approach in Oregon might be better to get the existing groups together and try to get us to move forward. So I'd like to know more about that and whether or not we can do something like that here in Oregon.
Sure. Ben, you want me to take that?
Yeah, sure. That'd be great.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. We see the need for a lot more communication and coordination between all of the groups working on the 28th Amendment generally. And one of the goals of the Writing the 28th Amendment project is to bring those groups together into a deliberative process about the language and the strategy of passing the 28th Amendment. We're 7 years out from Citizens United, and this kind of conversation, frankly, has not happened without American Promise's leadership on it. In our national conference, the National Citizen Leadership Conference last year, we had a panel on exactly this topic, and it was the first time that leadership from all of the various groups promoting various amendment proposals got together and had a public debate and deliberation about that. And so I think it's something that was needed and missing from the field, and it's a national conversation, and so there are folks from all over the country entering into this conversation. And we launched end of last month, and the conversation was recorded and is posted up on our website. We'll be sending out some details about that shortly. But you're welcome to participate and lean in and give any feedback that you may have for the project at any time. Thanks for the question.
Okay, great, thanks. Great question. We're going to do one more quick question before we move on. Let's go to Ellen Dockton. Ellen, how are you doing, and where are you calling in from?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I live in New Hampshire, but right now I'm on Cape Cod visiting family. Okay.
Great.
My question is there a way of accessing archival meetings of this group? This is my first time.
Actually, you know what? I'm sorry to cut off the question. I just saw our good friend Congressman McGovern jump on, and we're actually going to come back to that question. So if you can hold on to that, that would be wonderful. I am very excited to welcome our good friend, Congressman McGovern from Massachusetts. As I mentioned, Congressman McGovern has been really a true leader in this amendment movement since the beginning and is lead sponsor of the People's Rights Amendment and the co-sponsor of the We the People Amendment, what we're talking about today. And we're just thrilled to have the Congressman here with us today and truly grateful for all of his work on Capitol Hill, essentially to save democracy from the wealthy and special interests and powerful corporations. So, Congressman, before I pass it over to you, let me give you an idea of the kind of folks on this call. You're talking to folks like Robin Lynn in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, who just launched the first ever American Promise Association there. Yay. And Robin quickly realized that organizing her community to get involved in the APA was much harder than she had thought it was going to be. And she was turned down by a few organizations to participate in the launch, but really remained steadfast and hopeful and turned out a great crowd to launch the APA. And the Winston-Salem APA will join a lot of the growing numbers of APAs who are taking on the tough job of bringing Republicans onto these resolutions and kind of some of these much-needed breakthroughs for the movement. So that's just a quick example of some folks on this call. And Congressman, I will go ahead and pass it over to you if you're with us. It looks like maybe you just jumped back off, Congressman. So sorry, folks. It looks like the Congressman was on and then he was off again. So maybe some technical difficulties on his end. I was sorry to cut off the question, but let's go back to that question that I believe Ellen had, and that was Ellen Duckton from New Hampshire. Ellen, sorry about that. Go ahead if you have a question for Johannes.
Yeah, no, I was just asking about whether there's access to previous meetings, these Saturday meetings, so we can get that information that was already been discussed. This is my first time online with you, and I'm interested in learning more, but I need more information. I don't want to take up time asking information about material that I'm sure has already been talked about. So how do I do that? How do I get access to previous meetings?
Oh, we can send around recordings, and I will send around recordings on Monday to everyone that registered for the call. So that's a good question.
And then those of us who registered for this call but have not registered in calls in the past,
you know what? Oh, sorry to cut you off. I see the Congressman just jumped on again. Congressman, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm out in the middle of Massachusetts where apparently broadband is, never been heard of or whatever. But in any event,
no problem. We're thrilled. No problem. We're thrilled to have you with us, Congressman. If you want to take it away, that would be great, and then we're going to do a quick Q&A. Folks on the call are excited to have you on, and if you wanted to take away, that would be awesome. Congressman, I think we might be losing you in that Western Mass broadband. Can you hear us? Oh, okay. This is a little crazy. Sorry about that, folks. Yeah, I think we lost the Congressman. All right. So we're actually going to move on to a couple more questions. And again, if the Congressman can join again, we'll jump it over to him. But let's go to Ishwari. Ishwari, if you had a question for Johannes, go ahead.
Hi there. My question is, aren't the Democracy for All and We the People resolutions? And if they, how does a resolution, I don't think that language will actually end up as an amendment, will it?
Yeah, so that's how amendments are passed through Congress. They pass them as a joint resolution from the House and the Senate, and if those two versions agree, then it gets passed to the states for ratification. So that is the mechanism. Usually resolutions are passed as sort of non-binding statements of support, but that is the mechanism that an amendment would be passed by. So in the states, a lot of states, 19 states have passed resolutions in support of a federal constitutional amendment, but at the federal level, the resolutions like HJR, House Joint Resolution 48, and House Joint Resolution 31 are indeed the call for the actual amendment.
Great. Thanks, Johannes. Let's do one more question, and then we're going to move on with the call. Let's go to Lee Kettleson. Hi, Lee.
Hi. Maybe I'll admit that this is a little bit of a comment disguised as a question, but do you really feel that I know that Johannes was being fair in trying to list concerns that other people have, but do we really have unanswered questions about corporations needing constitutional rights? I and our organization in Massachusetts have felt that those questions have been answered by writings of the legal advisory team.
Oh, sorry, I accidentally muted you there, Lee. I think, Johannes, if you want to follow up with the question, that would be great, and then I will unmute Lee.
Sure, Lee, yeah, I think that's a fair question. Phrasing them or describing them as unanswered questions may not be entirely accurate. I think that all of them have answers. It's just that we get different answers depending on who you ask. So for the impacts of the constitutional rights for corporations, some folks would say, oh, they don't need them because really all of those rights that you're talking about and are interested in preserving are rights of the individual members of the nonprofit or the union or the shareholder of the corporation. There are sort of ways around it, but really I think that some of these we don't have really solid, firm consensus answers for. Some people disagree about how one or the other amendment would impact some of the jurisprudence, the doctrine about how those organizational standing cases would turn after the amendment. And there are certainly a lot of writings on these. There are a lot of law review articles on them, but I think that anyone who claims they know exactly what would happen after the passage of the amendment is either foolish or disingenuous, because really we don't know what the courts would do with these amendments. It's sort of we can take a good stab at it, and we can get the best research and have a really deliberate conversation about it. But until we've done that, and some people have had those conversations, I do not think that, to my satisfaction, we've done an exhaustive review of those cases, those law review articles, and had the conversation. And that's exactly what we intend and hope to do with the Writing the 28th Amendment project.
Great. Lee, do you have a follow-up there, or are you good?
Yeah. Well, maybe my question is also that what I've always learned is that we may, as a society, decide that certain nonprofits need certain kinds of protections or powers, but we can legislate that, and that I don't understand why it will all rest upon giving corporations constitutional rights that through much of our history they never had. So the legal question maybe that I don't understand is why we would ever not be able to give any type of corporation the kind of protections that we decide as a democracy that they should have, as opposed to assuming this artificial entity has constitutional rights.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah. So any right that a corporation currently enjoys as a constitutional right could be granted back as a statutory right or privilege. I think that's a satisfactory answer to some, but to others looking at the composition of the legislature, that may not be a very encouraging response to a concern about a state rating of Planned Parenthood office for privacy purposes. A lot of folks, I think, wouldn't be satisfied by current legislature's intent after an amendment like that would be passed. So you're absolutely correct. Anything that they currently enjoy as a constitutional right could theoretically, if the politics are there, be granted as a statutory right or privilege.
Great. Thanks, Johannes, and great questions. We're going to come back to some of those questions if Johannes will hang out with us for a little while. But we're going to move on to talk a little bit about our training on meetings with members of Congress. And so some of this is going to sound familiar and similar to last month, but it's important that we review and develop our skills so we can be effective in our advocacy on the ground at the grassroots level. And before we do the training real quickly, I'm going to welcome Charlotte Schaff from Santa Fe, New Mexico to the call to tell us a bit about her breakthrough and her experience using these trainings and turning them into a productive meeting with the office of Congressman Ben Ray Lujan. So Charlotte, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Ben. Thank you. I'm glad to be with everyone.
Thanks for joining.
And, I guess I should start by just telling you my story and kind of how our groups evolved and for me. And
great. Thanks. Actually, Charlotte, if we can pause for just a second, let's welcome the Congressman back on who may have better cell service.
No, temporary cell service. So let me be quick. First of all, thank you and thanks for your patience.
Yeah.
I am grateful to all of you for being on this call, and I'm grateful for your dedication to this issue. I'm not going to go. I mean, I have two bills, that I think I heard a little bit being talked about already. So all the legislation that's been introduced. But I'm simply on the call to basically tell you how incredibly important it is for members of Congress to hear from all of you and constituents about the importance of overturning Citizens United. I just came from office hours in a town called Barre in Massachusetts, pretty conservative town, and we had a bunch of people show up, some pretty conservative, some pretty liberal. But the one issue in which everybody's heads nodded up and down on approval was when I talked about the overturn Citizens United and to get money out of politics and how money has been a corrupting influence on our political system. I mean, everybody, left, right, everybody in between, they all get it. And what I said to them is what I'm going to say to you here today is we need to turn that consensus into activism and into pressure because I think everybody's in agreement, other than Congress, that this is the way to go. And I even think in Congress, if you had a secret vote, we would probably pass something that would move us toward a constitutional amendment, because I think Democrats and Republicans alike, I think most of them don't hate spending time raising money and understand that when you raise a lot of money from some of these powerful special interests, it creates pressure that, quite frankly, is not always constructive to solid policy and good policy. And so, what you can do on the local level, the town and cities passing resolutions, state resolutions, I think those things are incredibly important as well, because they give you the ability to go to your elected officials, be they Democrats or Republicans, and say, hey, look, your town, your constituency, your state, we're all in agreement. You need to get behind where the people are, and and in terms of kind of building that kind of consensus. And I'll just say this, I think the day somebody loses an election over this issue is the day everybody wakes up. I think too often in the past, when people have raised the issue of overturning Citizens United, it's been in the context of a lot of other issues, but it hasn't kind of been the litmus test, if you will, or the defining issue. I think it needs to be, because I think so much of what's bad that's happening in Washington and in politics is all related to money. It's all related directly to money. This issue solves a whole bunch of other problems if we get it right. So I would urge everybody not to be a cheap date when you talk about this with your member of Congress. I mean, this is one of these issues where you're either with us or you're against us. And if people doubt that, they can have an impact, I mean, take a page out of the National Rifle Association. Every time I vote for gun control, I get 1,000 calls objecting to my position. I feel the pressure. I think people need to feel the pressure on this issue, and so I hope that some of your conversation is based on it goes to that point. The final thing is, look, I have 2 constitutional amendments. I don't have any pride of authorship. I've told Jeff and I've told the people on previous calls, the American Promise calls. Look, I think you guys need to decide what it is that everybody can get behind, and then people like me need to say, okay, that's it. And so, I want you to know that we're looking to you to figure out, what is that 28th Amendment going to look like? What is the consensus document, if you will, the bill that we all should get behind? If it was mine, fine. If it's a combination of mine, fine. If it's somebody else's, that's fine too. But I think that's the other thing that I just wanted to impart to you. But I think this is incredibly important, and I just wanted to say thank you for doing this. And as somebody who's been in Congress for 20 years, and if you ask me what is the biggest problem, I would tell you it is money, and this is the only way to deal with that. And so we need to be successful here.
Absolutely, Congressman. Yeah, well said, and really thank you for your leadership. If we have time, maybe just a couple quick questions for the Congressman. If you want to press 1 on your keypad to let me know that you have a question, I'll go ahead and call on you. So this is a really great opportunity to have a discussion and a question with really one of the true leaders on this historic work in Congress. So if you have a question for the Congressman, go ahead and press 1 on your keypad and I'll call on you. And as people are pressing 1 on their keypad, Congressman, can you give us just a little bit of insight into folks on the call that might live in Republican districts? As we know, there's only one Republican co-sponsor on all the money in politics bills in Congress, thanks to you, and that's Walter Jones. But if you have any insight or advice for folks that live in Republican districts to try to partner with them to bring them on board, that would be great if you could share that.
Yeah, I think I would respond to that by saying that this really shouldn't be a partisan issue. It really is an issue more about who's in power. I mean, I think what a lot of Republicans are being told by their leadership is, look, we're in charge, and we're in charge in large part because of the money. So don't screw around with the money. I mean, we need to have it continue if we're going to maintain our positions in power. And and I think I think that's a part of it. But I'll go back to what I said earlier. I talked to a lot of Republicans who are very sympathetic on this issue. They don't want to spend time over the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee dialing for dollars, and I think on some issues, they'd be more likely to want to vote, a different way than they do if they didn't feel this incredible, pressure from a big money special interest or a super PAC or what have you. And so, like I said, I think there are a lot of rank and file Republicans who are very sympathetic. The deal is, what you need to do is kind of give them the wind at their back, if I can put it that way. To say, okay, I want to be on record on this, and that's where the lobbying comes in, and that's where visiting them comes in, and that's where making it clear that if you're not with us, that there's going to be a consequence on this.
Yeah, that's a great point, and just really illustrates how developing those relationships with your member of Congress is so important. Let's go to April Conlon real quickly for a question. April, where are you calling in from? Hello, April. Can you hear me?
You may be in Barrie, where I was.
Okay.
Perhaps.
Hi.
There's April.
I'm actually here.
Hi.
Hi. I'm calling in from Buffalo, New York. Thank you, Senator, for all you do and for leading the charge on this important, hopeful amendment that we will get passed. My question to you today, Senator, is really how you foresee campaigning develop after this amendment is passed, and how potential candidates would, I guess, campaign if we pass this amendment and we remove this money coming from super PACs and corporations.
So I'm assuming the question is if we know it pass, that if we're successful and that we limit the amount of money that is in politics.
Yes.
I think everything changes. I think you're going to see, people. You're going to see a lot more responsiveness to constituents. You're going to see a lot more town halls. You're going to see a lot more of people paying attention to like average citizens as opposed to just the wealthiest special interests in their state or in the country. I mean, I think this is about empowering people. I mean, I want any individual, voice to matter just as much, as a corporate special interest, with deep pockets. I mean, that's the way this system is supposed to work. I mean, listening to somebody who may not have a lot of wealth, but may have a legitimate point about something that needs to be addressed. I mean, and that person deserves, respect and attention. And I think that's what has been sacrificed with our current political system. I think people get empowered, and I think you're going to see, members of Congress spending a lot more time talking to people rather than just, sitting in corporate boardrooms or dialing for dollars over at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee or Republican Congressional Campaign Committee. I think you notice a definite improvement in terms of how government is being responsive to people.
Yeah, great question, April. Maybe one or two more questions for the Congressman. Let's go to Dan Coy. Dan, where are you calling in from?
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome, Dan.
Oh, hi. Yeah. So, question for the Congressman would be, we have the. I just got on the call. I was in a protest,
right.
and I'm trying to gather my thoughts here.
Good.
It was actually it was a great thing. We did good things here in Chicago today. So my question is, what can we offer? So I think it's getting Republicans on board, and I'm totally supportive of the idea of this has to be across the aisle because we're not going to get the numbers we need otherwise.
Right.
But what can we offer to the people that right now see that, that corporate money, they vote for very small interests, but it's keeping them in power. I think you've suggested, okay, you're going to get elected out next time. Is there anything else? So that's the stick. Is there a carrot in there anywhere that, we can promise to work with them or help them? Or anything like that?
Look, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, you're going to have to evaluate, how much support you can give them based on a whole range of issues. But look, I think, the deal is that, acknowledging that they're on the right side is also a powerful motivator. Some of the people who may come and visit a particular member of Congress may, have had a long history of being in opposition to that member of Congress. The mere fact that you could possibly be on record as saying, I appreciate what Congressperson so-and-so did. That's a motivator in and of itself. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the stick, which is, we're going to do this differently. We're going to be camped outside your office, on a weekly basis with signs. We're going to be doing petitions. We're going to be reminding people that you are part of the problem. Because, by the way, most people in this country, Democrat or Republican, liberal, conservative, all think this money plays too big a role in politics. But you don't have to endorse the person. But I think the other thing, the one thing members of Congress all have in common is we all want to get reelected. The other thing we have in common is we all like it when people say nice things about us. So, I think that's a powerful motivator in and of itself.
Absolutely. Let's do one more question, if that's all right, Congressman.
Yep, one more.
One more, and let's go to Craig Cleveland. Craig, where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Kalispell, Montana, and thanks, Congressman, for your willingness to lead us in our movement. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to apologize in advance for asking you a tough question about the elephant in the room in our movement. In the last election cycle, there were two special interest groups that raised and spent more to influence elections than all the candidates and all the corporate spending through super PACs combined. That's political parties, of course. Candidate Hillary Clinton was able to solicit a single check from individuals of over $356,000 by using joint campaign committees recently allowed by the McCutcheon decision. For 7 years, my organization has been lobbying a limit that would directly limit donations to campaigns and the political parties to an amount that meets the standard of reasonably affordable by the average American. Wouldn't require a constitutional amendment at this point, although it could be overturned, obviously. What would your thoughts be on the dramatically increasing donor donations that have gone up threefold in just a year? Do you see it as a problem, and would you consider legislation?
Yeah, well, look, I'm very sympathetic to what you just outlined here, and I but just I understand. Are you asking that we tell me the legislation that you're advocating?
Well, a limit to direct donations to the political parties. Right now, that's set by statute.
Yeah, no, right, no, and I look at when I say there's too much money in politics, I mean not just individual candidates and not just super PACs, but the political parties as well. There's just too much money, and I think however we get at it, we ought to understand that we mean it totally. We're not just talking about one particular slice of a political campaign. I get it. That political parties raise an awful lot of money, and they will say to you that they have to because it costs money to organize, it costs money to do this, and we have to keep up with the other party. And I think that's all. I get that. It's we don't. None of us want to believe. Nobody believes in unilateral disarmament. But I think if we're talking about getting money out of the entire system, and cleaning up our process that has been polluted by big corporate money, including in the political parties. And I'm a Democrat, but I will tell you, I'm uneasy about all the corporate donations that go to the Democratic Party as well. I think we have to be open to, talking about everything. And so, anyway, someone before, I don't know, you said earlier, someone thanked me for my leadership. Okay, the way I'm hoping I think American Promise is approaching this issue is it's your leadership is going to tell us, what it is that we can put forward and what it is that we should get behind. And so sure. I'm looking to you to tell me, based on, this grassroots movement all across the country about what it is that people feel that they're comfortable getting behind and what is doable, where you can get consensus and what all of us should sign on in Washington and what we should be lobbying Republicans and Democrats for.
Absolutely, Congressman. Yeah, and that's the idea, and that's why we do these trainings, and that's why these calls are so important. So again, many thanks to you, many thanks to your leadership, and for bearing with us today and finding some good cell service. So,
I apologize that I was in the part of my district that doesn't have good cell service. But I did want you to know that in this small town of Barre, Massachusetts, where we had a big kind of turnout of people, that this issue was talked about for about 20 minutes, and I didn't bring it up.
Great.
Someone had brought it up, so this is a big deal. So thank you.
Fantastic, Congressman. We'll talk to you soon, and thanks again. So let's kick it over to Charlotte Schaff. Charlotte was sorry to cut you off there, but want to welcome you back onto the call as we heard from the Congressman how important it is to develop those racial relationships with members of Congress and their staff. And Charlotte was going to talk a little bit about her experience with the office of Congressman Ben Ray Lujan. So Charlotte, welcome back. Sorry about that, and I'll kick it back over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. No problem at all. It was enjoyable to listen to Congressman McGovern. Well, to get started, last year I worked in the election, and I was really shocked that we didn't win. And afterwards, I just felt really disillusioned and frustrated and knew that it wasn't healthy for me to be screaming at the news on my TV all the time. So I decided to get inside the Democratic Party to have a voice in choosing future progressive candidates and to help formulate the party's platform. And I was really upset about many issues and couldn't really decide what was the most important to focus on. So I went on the local department's Democratic Party's website to see what opportunities there might be. And that's where I discovered there was a meeting last April about money out of politics. And a big bell rang for me that money in politics was the specific issue that affects all the other issues I was upset about. And so that meeting was where I heard you, Ben, speak about the 28th Amendment. And I was so inspired by the fact that there was a national grassroots organization, American Promise, that was already well underway with a plan and solutions on how to fix this problem. And I was really impressed by your knowledge and enthusiasm, Ben. And then after the meeting, I bought and read Bruce Berlin's book, Breaking Big Money's Grip on America. And I started attending Bruce Berlin's New Mexico Money Out of Politics meetings. And they're the local group that's affiliated with American Promise. And after several training sessions, we broke into small groups of 5 or 6 people each, and who would be responsible for reaching out to our federal legislators. And I joined the group assigned to Congressman Ben Ray Lujan. And our group met together a few times to develop a plan, and we took the first step and met with his constituent liaison, Nick Maestas. And most of us were really nervous, and I was afraid I would mess up my part and forget to say something important. But we each told our personal story about why we were interested in this topic and what had brought us there. And so then we discussed our views on the issue with Nick, and he was so receptive and so kind, and so it made the rest of us relax. And he advised us to attend a Lujan Town Hall, which we did, and now we expect to get on Lujan's schedule to talk directly with him sometime during the August recess. So I have to say the training we received from our conference calls from you, Ben, at American Promise at our local meetings was really invaluable in getting us well informed and prepared for our meeting with the Congressman's staff. And it'll make us better prepared for a successful outcome when we finally get to meet with the Congressman himself. But I want to stress this is a slow process, but I now feel personally empowered with the sense of direction and real hope for success in getting New Mexico to join with other states to enact a really strong political amendment to get corporate influence and big money out of our political system.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Charlotte, and thank you for your kind words as well. But really, it's all about you and the work that you're doing, and it's quite wonderful and inspiring. So I'm looking forward to continuing that important work with you in the Santa Fe group, and so just really appreciate all the great work that you guys are doing on the ground out there, and I think we're feeling some breakthroughs coming soon. So thanks again, Charlotte.
And thank you.
Absolutely. And so we're going to move on. On our call last month, Sam Daly Harris was discussing trainings and meetings with member of Congress, and he said this that I think struck me. And what he said was, in the end, this work really comes most alive in the context of group support, having people around you who will support each other in getting their letters to the editor sent, or support each other in getting the meetings with member of Congress scheduled, just like Charlotte did. And so if you're on for starting an APA, again, with Joyce's support, write her and let her know, joyces@americanpromise.net. And if you're not on for such a big launch, then we'll bring a few others together to start a core team on your own. And doing this work with a small or large committed group of others, I think really makes a big difference to have that support structure and to stay in action. And so if you're up for getting a meeting with your U.S. or state representative, I urge you to listen to the April conference call that goes over how to get a meeting with a member of Congress, really kind of the nuts and bolts of how we actually do this. And I'm going to send that recording around to folks on Monday so they can listen to that. But on this call, I want to again practice the big ask, right, which comes from the fact that, as I mentioned before, really of all of the money in politics bills in Congress, there's only one Republican co-sponsor, and that's Walter Jones from North Carolina. And so we're asking our members of Congress if they would partner with us in bringing Republicans on the legislation. And of course, we want them to be co-sponsors themselves, but once they are, looking at the next thing, after obviously thanking them, is asking them to partner with us in bringing Republicans on to the bills in Congress. I believe that the Santa Fe group is really excited about the fact that if they can succeed in working with their members of Congress, similar to what Charlotte was talking about, they will have contributed, a major breakthrough, not just for the legislation or American Promise or New Mexico, but really for the entire movement in this 28th Amendment fight. And so on Friday, I sent an action sheet around on getting representatives to co-sponsor the We the People Amendment that Johannes was talking about before. And you should all have the info you need in the action sheet, including the full text of the amendment. And I urge you to stick around after the call and write your letter to your representative. And instructions are in that action sheet. So your member of Congress, might be stymied at first and might say something like, wait, bring Republicans on board? Me? How do I do that? But, you want to have a conversation with Democrats in Congress about any Republicans on committees, that they're on, or any Republicans that they like to work with specifically. And of course, we can't just ask them to do all of the heavy lifting. We have to find friends or relatives in other cities and states who care about making a difference and overturning Citizens United, and their member of Congress is a Republican. So if we're willing to reach out to our friends and our relatives, that live in other districts, potentially Republican districts, join them, bring them on the call. Let's help them get good meetings and good follow-up from those meetings with their members of Congress. And so if you'll remember, we talked a little bit about this last month. Citizens Climate Lobby, which is another group that Sam Daly Harris coaches, played a pretty key role in getting 20 House Republicans to co-sponsor a resolution saying that climate change is real, and that humans have played a part in creating that. And so 20 Republicans, 20 Democrats joining the House Climate Solutions Caucus. Pretty impressive work. And if they can have these kind of breakthroughs on climate change, we can do it on getting money out of politics. And I think that that's really what these sessions are all about. And so I'm going to do just like we did last month, a quick role play, and I'm going to ask for volunteers, or one volunteer actually. It's important to our work to do this type of role play and this type of training, but this is going to be a conversation with your member of Congress who's a Democrat and a co-sponsor of the amendment already, co-sponsor of the amendment already, and we want to have a discussion about partnering with them to bring a Republican on board the legislation. And so I'm going to throw out some ideas and then ask for a volunteer to try the conversation with Joyce Sanchez, who's going to play the member of Congress. And so one good strategy is asking questions and really listening carefully, listening for an opening where there's alignment. Questions like these might be good for a Republican member of Congress. Something like, what are your views on Citizens United? What are your thoughts on the notion that money is speech? If money is speech, does that mean that someone who has lots of money has a much bigger voice than someone with little money? And so also maybe if you could do anything to lessen the influence of money in politics, what would you do? And then, maybe something like, what does the statement draining the swamp mean to you, right? And really the idea is not to get into a debate, but really to listen, hear where they're coming from, and then look for an opening on where you guys might agree. And so those might be good questions for a Republican member of Congress. For a Democratic member of Congress who's already a co-sponsor, you might want to ask if they've ever spoken to a Republican colleague about the Citizens United decision, and if so, what they said. Ask them, what they think would be the best approach to bring Republicans on board. The Democracy for All Amendment, which we talked about last month, has 101 co-sponsors, all Democrats. How much is a problem is that in getting the job done, Or ask them if there are Republicans that they especially like to work with. And so these are just some ideas of questions that we can use in our meetings with member of Congress. So I'm going to throw this out there. Who wants to join Joyce in a volunteer role play conversation with your member of Congress? We're looking for someone to be brave. And trust me, everyone on the call is going to love you for getting them off the hook if you do this. So press 1 on your keypad if you are up for doing a quick role play, and I will call on you and unmute you. So let's do, looks like Chuck Tyler was quick to press 1 on your keypad. Chuck, where are you calling in from?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey, how's it going?
Chuck,
I'm calling from Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. Okay, welcome, Chuck. And Joyce, are you on the line as well?
I'm on the line.
Hey, Joyce, are you a Republican member of Congress or a Democratic member of Congress?
I think I'm going to be a Republican member of Congress.
A Republican member of Congress. Okay, so Chuck, I want you to just do a quick role play with Joyce on what you might say to Joyce being a Republican member of Congress, and go ahead and take it away, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Hi, Congressman Joyce. I'm Chuck. I'm one of your constituents. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Chuck?
I'm doing well, thanks. Ma'am, I really appreciate your support in the past for military issues. As a U.S. Army combat veteran, I know how much the military means to you, and thank you so much for your past votes in support of the military and veterans like myself.
Definitely. I've always supported military and veterans, and I will continue to do that throughout my time in office.
I appreciate you saying that you'll continue to do that throughout your time in office, because one of the things I'd like to discuss with you is how can we stick to our promise that we made to defend the Constitution in light of one person, one vote. That's definitely something that I fought for when I went overseas. And you do understand that when we go overseas for democracy-building missions, we should be the example that other countries look up to, shouldn't we?
I think we should, yes.
That's great. I'm in agreement with you there. And so the best way for us to be an example for democracies around the world, especially when we deploy to help build democracies around the world, is for us to adhere to the one person, one vote. I mean, that's what our country was founded on, wasn't it?
I think it was.
Outstanding. And do you feel that the decision made under Citizens United fits the one person, one vote model?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me, so can you just elaborate a little bit on Citizens United, just to make
Absolutely.
sure I'm thinking of it?
Absolutely. One of the things that I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that was great, Chuck. I think we saw a really great example of how this would go. And what I loved about that is kind of, you develop that immediate bond with Congressman Sanchez by talking about the military issues and veterans issues, and finding that common ground, is a great way to really break the ice and develop that relationship. Chuck, is there anything that you think that you might do differently, or did you think that you nailed it?
I think one of the things I would do differently is get to the point quicker, because I don't want to waste the congressperson's time.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe a little bit quicker, certainly, but honestly, I think taking the time to find that, that common ground is so important. And I really thought that you did a great job. And I think you're about to get to your ask, which is to co-sponsor the amendment and to help bring some other members of Congress on board, which is really critical. So we kind of had our call today back and forth with the congressman and Charlotte a little bit out of order, and we're coming up on the hour, and we do try to keep these to 60 minutes long. So, but before we hop off, let's just do a quick review of the next steps and how we're going to get involved with this. So, again, if you want to start a new American Promise Association in your community, you can reach out to Joyce Sanchez. It's joyce@americanpromise.net. I'm also going to be sending everyone an email on Monday that'll have a link in it that you can click on and let us know, fill out a form and let us know that that's something that you're interested in doing. And so that's one thing. And then the next thing is use use some of this training in the Citizen Action Center on our website to complete the action for the next call. And so the next steps would really be to use the action sheet, write and send your letter on the We the People resolution, Send in their request for your meeting if you haven't done so, and listen to the recording from last month's call if you need more coaching. And then follow up by phone if you don't hear from them in about a week or so, and start gathering a few others to practice the meeting agenda with you. As we heard from Charlotte, those practice sessions were really helpful in organizing the meeting and knowing what you're going to say, so you show up prepared. And then do your research on what to thank them for. Similar to what we heard from the role play, finding that common ground is really important. So do your research, and then have a great meeting, and then practice, and follow up to answer any questions that the congressperson or their staff might have that you couldn't answer. Again, I'm going to be sending an email on Monday that outlines these steps in more detail with really helpful links that can get you into action. And in the email, I'm going to include the recording for the more in-depth training that Sam Daly-Harris did in April. Also there's going to be an RSVP link for the next call that's scheduled for Saturday, July 8th. And that's going to be at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. Again, the calls are always the second Saturday of each month. And I know we're running a couple minutes over 2 o'clock here Eastern Time, but I just want to end the call with a brief quote. This quote comes from Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart. And the Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart said, "We aren't passengers on spaceship Earth, we're the crew. We aren't residents on this planet, we're citizens. The difference in both cases is responsibility." And I'm going to just say that again. Schweickart said, "We aren't passengers on spaceship Earth. We are the crew. We aren't residents on this planet. We are citizens. The difference in both cases is responsibility." So thank you all on the call for being the crew and for being citizens. You're all amazing. And I'm going to take everyone off mute right now so we can say bye-bye. And again, really looking forward to working with all of you. So go ahead and say bye to everybody, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Bye.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ben.
Interesting.